In this talk we want to deal with a few issues relating to operations management, a few key issues that relate to operations management. Now this particular session is related to other videos on this topic of introducing operations management, and it's well worthwhile making sure that you are familiar with those as well. Make your own notes, as I've said in many other videos. Make your own notes, stop the videos, wind it forwards, wind it backwards, do some reading and pad out your notes, and make sure you've got a good understanding of this important area. Operations management is a vital role within organizations, within businesses. So let's start. First of all, let's look at some managerial issues and issues related to operations management. For a start, there's increasing power of the consumers, and we can look at the increasing power of consumers, the information that consumers have at their disposal via the internet, for example, legislation which gives consumers rights and so on. So there is increasing power of consumers, and we may look at these under various headings. For example, the process of globalization. Globalization has meant that costs have been reduced, and there is now more producers or competitors in the market for many items compared to some years ago. And consumers are in a better position to pick and negotiate as a consequence of the greater supply. So there's an increasing power to the consumer, but globalization has facilitated that by increasing the supplies, the greater number of outlets selling products that the consumers want has meant that the consumers get better deals, they get better they get a better treatment in a sense. Maybe treatment is not the right word, but they get a better treatment in the sense that they're able to negotiate the price, perhaps look for discounts, there'll be more frequent sales, and so on. There's also, of course, the development of e-business, and again, this increases the power of the consumers. E-business means that there is access to cheap products online, and outlets such as eBay and Amazon and so on are able to supply products on a very cheap basis. But individual companies may have their own shops online as well, so that there is a highly competitive environment online. The businesses online don't generally have big overheads like stores and a lot of staff, and so generally speaking the products online are much cheaper. Now, greater productivity is another managerial issue. Better quality products, for example, may run hand in hand with better productivity. Bear in mind here there is an issue about measuring productivity. We're not quite sure precisely how to measure productivity in many instances, mostly because workers work with machines. So if there's an increase in output, is the increase in output due to greater efficiency of the worker or greater efficiency of the machine? And it's sometimes difficult to tell. But the greater emphasis on quality, that is something which is relatively new. We can trace it back to the 1940s and into the 50s in Japan and so on. But there's now much more emphasis on quality, and also producers who are keen to project their reputations and keen to satisfy customers' needs by offering better quality also offer facilities to return the product if it doesn't meet the customer's requirements, and the whole emphasis is on giving the customers more satisfaction, better treatment. So better customer service, perhaps more backup, related to the products. Customers who have an issue with a purchase may perhaps phone the customer service department and ask for advice, or return the product, or have it repaired, or whatever the issue is. And the movement in operations management and the running of the business is such that it facilitates this. It almost expects it. There's a department that will look after the customers, and in that way, of course, it will facilitate marketing. It makes the life of the marketing department that little bit easier, because they're able to say there is good and effective backup facilities. Shorter delivery times is also seen as important. Customers want the product now. They don't want it in 6 weeks' time. They want the product now, if possible. So having to wait is not what we like. We like short delivery times. We like to place the order for the product and get it next day, if possible, or get it immediately, if possible. But the emphasis on more efficiency within the organization, better layout of facilities, higher productivity, and so on, these can facilitate better delivery times, so the customer gets the product faster. And also there's reducing labor and material costs. Reducing costs so that savings can be passed on to the customer, the product becomes more competitive in the market, and again the life of the marketing department is made that little bit easier, because the product is now competitively priced, and it's the competitors who have a problem. They need to price their products competitively as well. Now, operations management. Well, operations management deals with the transformation of inputs, such as raw materials and labour, into outputs in the form of finished goods and services. That's what operations management does. It transforms inputs into outputs. It's the facility within the business. It's that department within the business that takes responsibility for the production of the output. So in a sense, the operations management diagram is a very straightforward one. We have inputs, we have manufacturing, machining, we have whatever the processes that are required are. These are the transformation processes, and the inputs are then transformed into outputs. And that is the essence of operations management. Now let's look at operations management and the organization. Well, we've got the marketplace. That is the focus of the effort. The organization is looking at the marketplace. That's where the customers are. That's where their sales are. So they need to know the marketplace. They need to know what's required there. And they need to develop a corporate strategy. And the corporate strategy is derived from what the company understands of the marketplace. What are the customers' requirements? What are customers willing to pay for the product? What specifications do they want in the product? So corporate strategy is broadly based on fact-finding from the marketplace. And under corporate strategy, we have various departments which are going to facilitate the corporate strategy, the achievement of the strategy. Now, I've simplified this a lot. So the idea here is just to show some departments, but a real organization, not one on a simple slide like this. A real organization would have many aspects to it, and it would be a lot more complex, and there'd be a lot more lines and arrows. But the essence of what I've got here is fine. So here I've got corporate strategy, and I've got 3 strategies under it, just for illustrative purposes: marketing strategy, operations, and finance. And the reason why I've done that is just to say that operations strategy is a part of the corporate strategy. It's every bit as much a part of the corporate strategy as marketing or finance or those other areas. And as I said, in a full-scale organizational chart of a business, there will be many different departments, all with arrows connecting, showing how they're connected to other departments and how they link to the corporate strategy. In our case here, we get the idea that operations management deserves its place at the table. Operations management is an important function of corporate strategy. Now let's look at the top-down approach to operations management strategy. Well, operations strategy decisions. Well, there's the strategic decision, which is the long-run decision, the operations strategic decision. In other words, they might buy machines which are going to last for a long time, last 10 years or 20 years. It's a big commitment. It's a long-term commitment. They have to recognize that the machines may become outdated and may become obsolete. Technology moves on. Can the machines be upgraded? There are many aspects to looking into long-term operations decisions, because we don't live in a static world. We live in a world which is typified by change and innovation and new technology. But one thing remains constant here, is its needs of customers, and the needs of customers must be met. So whatever technology or whatever direction the operations management take in terms of meeting long-term strategic decisions, what they must do is ensure that the customers and the requirements of the customers will be met. Now that is it's easier said than done. It's easy to state this, but in practice, customer needs are also changing. We're becoming much more sophisticated, much more demanding as well. We want products that's going to last for a long time. At the same time, can be upgraded. They have got high functionality. They're cheap. They're good quality. They're modern. They're up to date. They're well styled. And as I said, they're upgradable. So we want, in a sense, we want everything, and we want it as cheaply as possible. So the needs of the customers must be taken into account, and the operations management must recognize these and try to facilitate it as much as possible. Clearly the list I've just given can't be met in practice, but as much as possible. Then we've got the tactical, the medium range strategy decisions. And the tactical is to make sure there's efficient scheduling of resources, and that in the medium term, however that's defined, depends on the nature of the business. The medium term could be a week or could be 6 months. Depends on the nature of the product. But it means that resources are being scheduled efficiently and that the business is configured correctly. It's running correctly in terms of its efficiency targets. The operational planning and control, this is the short range. This looks at the immediate tasks and activities. What's happening right now? What's happening today? What machines are working? What machines are broken down? How much stock is in the store? These are operational issues, dealing with it right now. So we have strategic planning. That seems to be at the top. That's the one that's long run. Normally, strategic planning is conducted by senior management. Then we have the tactical planning. The tactical, which is the medium term. This is the one that looks at all the issues of production, the constraints, if you like, of what can be done. This is the one that puts the brakes on strategic planning, because it tells the management what is possible. Strategic planning may be aspirational, but tactical planning is practical. It's what can be done. And that moves also to operational planning and control. So we move from the long term to the medium term to the here and now, the operational planning, which is the immediate planning that's going on in the business. So let's look at the operational level operational level operations management perspective. Well, the function of operations management is to add value through the transformation process, which converts inputs into outputs. So at the operational level, it's monitoring and dealing with the transformation process. The technology will have been ironed out at the more tactical level, perhaps ironed out in the past. The technology, the machinery, the layout, that will have been planned. The operational is to make sure that it's working here and now. And it's converting the inputs into outputs. So we can see it on different levels. There's on a physical level, it's manufacturing. It's physical. It could be locational, in which case we're dealing with transportation. Because of the location of the business, the raw materials must be brought in perhaps by lorry, and the output may be moved off by van or by lorry or whatever. So it's locational is linked to transportation. It could also be looked at in terms of exchange, which is, let's say, retailing, selling the product, exchanging the product for money, which presumably is why the business was set up, so it could generate a profit. It could look at it in terms of storage, and storage suggests warehousing. Where can the product be stored? It could be physiological, looking at healthcare. It could be looking at issues of health within the business, or it could be looking at healthcare products, looking at transforming inputs into outputs which are used in healthcare. And it could be informational, it could be telecommunications. So we've got a whole range of industries or processes and their counterparts. So we could have, as I said, going back over them in terms of products, we could have the physical, making something, locational, well, operating a transport business, let's say, exchange, operating a range of shops or outlets, storage, looking at warehousing, physiological, healthcare products, informational, looking at telecommunications and telecommunications systems. Or indeed, we could look at all of those, as I said right at the start, in terms of processes within the business, because there are aspects of all of those almost as a microcosm, almost on a small level within the business. So we can imagine the business being physical, making things, locational, it's located somewhere, so it needs transport to get its products around, exchange, it needs to sell the products, as I said earlier, storage, it needs to store them somewhere, and physiological, looking after the health issues of the workforce and the production facilities, that they are safe and in accordance with legislation, and informational, that information flows around the system. So we've got different ways of looking at these 6 points as a process within the business or as types of business. Go whichever way you wish. Now let's look at the transformation process. We start with the external factors. These could be environmental issues. It could be regulation on the part of government, legislation relating to employment, for example. It can be consumer groups, pressure groups. So it can be a whole variety of external factors which will impinge upon the business. The external factors influence the transformation process. The way the transformation process takes place, the way the waste material is disposed of at the end, the type of technology that's going to be used, and so on. We also have components that fit into the transformation process, because it's components that are going to partly make whatever it is that's been produced. It may be made up from raw materials and components. The components may be bought in from outside suppliers, for example. So we have the inputs flowing through the transformation process to the outputs, and that's what's been monitored by the operations management. And the way it's monitored is by taking measurements of the output. So we have measure on the right hand side, and that goes into a feedback system where measurement information is fed back to management, and any deviations or any anomalies or any problems associated with the output, that's fed back, and there's an adjustment made, which is indicated by adjust on the left hand side. So the transformation process may be amended according to the feedback. Now, operations management and society. Well, higher standards of living may have resulted from more efficient production. Better way of working. The product of that is more output, perhaps more employment, better quality employment, more salary, and it's also the ability to increase productivity. It's the particular point I've made here. Higher standards of living related to productivity, albeit, as I've said in this and in other videos, there is a difficulty in measuring productivity. It's not an easy concept. Are we talking about the productivity of the capital or the productivity of labour? Well, generally speaking, we measure productivity as output per worker. But again, I think I mentioned earlier, workers work with machines. Perhaps the machine has improved. So the output of the worker has remained the same. It's just the overall output has increased, but that's because the machine has improved. So it's the productivity of the machine that has improved. So there are issues about measuring productivity. It's not an easy concept. The higher standard of living could be brought about because of lower costs of goods and services. More efficiency leads to lower costs. It means that for a given cost structure, more output can be achieved. More output, falling prices. So higher standards of living may come about through better working practices. And there's a better quality of goods and services. There's more emphasis on quality under modern operations management techniques. Competition increases quality for a start. Reputation of businesses are broadly based on quality and the experiences of customers. And today, this type of information about quality, can be disseminated very quickly via the internet, via blogs and posts to sites and so on. So competition facilitates the drive towards quality. Companies want to be seen as having good quality products, and they want information to go around the market that their product is high quality, and in that way gain a competitive advantage over the other companies in the market. Concern for the environment. Well, recycling and concern for air and water quality. These are now expected of companies, and operations management must take them on board. There has to be responsibility for what happens to the immediate environment. If the local community where the business is situated. If the local community are suffering poor air quality because of the business, that is not right. It's not deemed right. It's not acceptable in today's world. And if they're polluting the rivers and the streams and so on, that's also not acceptable. And there are laws to say it shouldn't happen. Improved working conditions. Well, better job design and employee participation means that workers are more engaged in the work and they feel more part of it and more interested. People may not work just for salary or wages. They may work for interest in the work. It's part of their life. It's how they're spending their life. We also have the application of operations management techniques to the service sector and to service operations. For example, we can look at, let's say, fast food, and we may have batch cooking in fast food takeaways. So it could be that throughout the day, depending on what statistics tell the management about the demand for the product at different times of the day and different days of the week, they're able to prepare food in advance and have it ready so that when the customers enter the premises, the food is almost waiting for them. It's been pre-prepared. And there's also a drive in the service operations to have just-in-time service. So when we enter, let's say, a restaurant, the food does not take a long time between ordering and receipt. It's parts of the food may have been prepared in advance, and other parts are prepared with the order in mind. But the food arrives in a timely fashion. But it applies in many areas of the service sector as well. But essentially, what it's trying to do is offer a better service to the customer. It may be that some parts of the service sector, service operations, may be automated. For example, the stores provide a service to the business, and many shops have stores associated with them where they store their products, like a warehouse, for example. And there may be automatic inventory replenishment in there. When stocks hit a critical level, the management are informed straight away by software that indicates that certain items are running low. A database, for example, can send a message to the management to reorder this particular item. So we can see the product as this in this sort of Venn diagram of this overlap between service and good. Now, the difference between goods and services, and this has been dealt with in other videos, but nonetheless I think we should run through it here as well. For a start, look at goods. Well, goods tend to be tangible. Goods are something which are tactile. We can touch them. They can be put into stock and they can be saved up. They can be produced today and put into the stores and used tomorrow or next week or whenever. So we have this concept of storage associated with goods. We can store them up. And there's very little interaction between the customer and the process. There's usually none. The customers simply place an order for the final product, and the process happens away from the consumer. It happens in the company. So the goods are produced in the company, and the consumer does not see the processes of manufacturing. They don't need to see the process of manufacturing. They just need the final product. For services, well, we can't touch the service. The service is either good or bad, and it's not tactile. It's intangible. And we can't store up the service. We can't store the service in the same way as goods. We can't have a lot of service now and put it into storage and use it later. The service happens immediately. It happens at the point of contact between the customer and the person supplying the service. So there is direct interaction between the customer and the process. Most products are a bundle of goods and services. Having said that, if we look at this diagram, we can envisage situations where we have 100% goods or 100% services. So, for example, in a grocery shop, there are a lot of goods, but there's still service. The people running the shop have to supply a service to the customer. They have to help the customer find particular products, or and certainly at the checkout, when the groceries are purchased, they have to ring up the prices and take the payment and so on. So there is a service element in grocery shops. At the other extreme, consultancy is nearly all service. So we have 100% of, nearly 100% of the situation that consultants find themselves in and buyers find themselves in when dealing with consultants, that is service. So it's service in the sense that the people meet, they meet face to face, the consultant and the client meet face to face, they discuss the issues. There might be some products involved, paper, pens, computers, transport, but essentially it's a service. So we can rate goods normally as having some service component and some physical component. So we have a scale. Hotels are probably in the middle. They supply a service. We can stay at the hotel, but they also supply food, and drink, and they also offer services. Now, an expanded definition of quality may also be useful. Quality is important in all functional areas of an organization. As I said earlier on, quality runs from start to finish, and the operators on the shop floor in manufacturing are encouraged to use their eyes and their faculties to spot anomalies or spot issues and flag these up so that the products can be dealt with and the issue can be dealt with and production can be stopped. It doesn't have to waste resources further along the supply chain. So remedial action can be taken at the point at which the problem arises. Quality is now much more than the technical requirements for manufactured goods. Quality now runs all the way through to marketing and the marketing services that are provided and the aftercare service and the customer relations management services. And so quality now runs all the way through the organization. It is not just looking at the technical side of the operation. And service quality, customer relations, as I just said earlier, that is also extremely important, and it's essential that there is good service quality to go with, if it's a physical product, to go with that. If it's a service, to go with the service, that there is follow-up and the customer's satisfaction is surveyed, and if any issues are spotted, that, as I said earlier, remedial action is taken to solve that. So that's all I'm going to deal with in this session. It's a real mixture of ideas, all related to operations management. Each one of these sets of ideas are important, and it's important that you read more about them, make notes, and follow up on each of the points. That's the textbook that was used, and quite a valuable one if you happen to see it, but if you don't, there are sufficient readings elsewhere to compensate. But that's a very good text and one worth noting. That's all I'm going to deal with, so thank you for watching.